Hello, and welcome to the American Musicological Society's online video interview series. My name is Jordan Musser, and I serve as managing editor of AMS Publications. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Mark Evan Bonds to discuss his wonderful new book in the AMS book series, AMS Studies in Music, published by Oxford University Press. Professor Bonds is the Carrie C. Boschmer Distinguished Professor Emeritus at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His new book is entitled Music's Fourth Wall and the Rise of Reflective Listening. Leading today's conversation is the series editor of AMS Studies in Music, Gurminder Bhogal. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Gurminder.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you so much, Evan. I'm so excited to have this time with you, and I'm really thrilled to welcome your book to the AMS Studies in Music series. So thank you for this opportunity. I thought I'd begin with, what grabbed my attention the most when I got to hear about your project, which is the title. So I'm wondering if you could please just guide us through the title, which is so captivating, Music's Fourth Wall and the Rise of Reflective Listening.
Well, great to be here, Gurminder, and thanks for all your help in the process of getting this book out finally. The concept of the fourth wall, I think, is well known in theater, where it's a kind of imagined barrier between the stage and the audience. The actors on the stage act literally as if the audience is not there, and the more audiences can enter into that world that's on the stage, the more deeply moved they are. And I think the concert hall also has its own kind of fourth wall. And really your awareness of it or your lack of awareness of it really changes how you hear music, what you hear in the music. In the theater, if an actor steps out of character and addresses the audience, it really shakes things up. Suddenly you're aware of what's going on behind what you're watching. You're aware that what you're perceiving is really an artifice, a very calculated artifice intended to move you in a certain way. And in music, sometime around the late Enlightenment, so late 18th century, and particularly in the works of Joseph Haydn, you begin to find composers who are doing the equivalent of stepping out of character. And the best known example of that is the string quartet, Opus 33, number 2 by Haydn. This is a work that's come to be known as the joke quartet. And the joke is in the finale, where the music follows the conventions of rondo form and draws to a close, and you think it's over, and then it starts up again, and then it draws to a close, and you think it's over, and then it starts up again, and you don't realize that it's ended, but it's ended. So it's playing with Haydn's playing with listener expectations, and in effect is coming out from behind the stage and saying, I'm yanking your chain. Look at me. And you become aware of music as an artifice. And that's a very different kind of listening experience from what I call resonating with the music, where you really become so engrossed in the music that you forget everything around you. You in extreme forms, you can have transcendent moments. And I hope everybody listening to this has had those. Where you forget where you are, you forget what you're listening to. You simply are completely absorbed by the music, and you transcend all time and space. Not a common occurrence, but happens enough that it becomes a kind of extreme of one end of the listening spectrum. And that's what I call resonant listening, because we resonate with the music. And then on the other end is what I call reflective listening, which is what began to gather steam in the late 18th century. Reflective listening is very, very different. It's no less legitimate. There's no wrong way to listen. But it's a very different kind of listening, where you're quite aware of what the players or the actors on stage are doing. You're aware of their craft. You're aware of what the composer has done. You can hear invertible counterpoint. You can hear stretto and a fugue, and you're aware of those things. And that's all fine and good, and that's what we teach in music appreciation. But it also changes the overall experience as well. And so my book traces the rise of reflective listening in the late 18th, early 19th century, and then ends with the birth of what we now recognize as the music appreciation industry, which tells people how to listen.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would love to just find out a little bit more from you about these two types of listening. I was really struck when I was reading your work about the way you describe resonant listening as draining. And I'd love to hear more about that experience for the listener, especially when you describe reflective listening as a skill that you say could be learned and developed. And I wonder how that kind of listening, I'm thinking about, some of the hot topics that are taught today in our various curricula, how that relates to issues of social class, for instance. So I wonder if you could just address those two different issues with respect to these two types of listening.
Yeah, resonant listening can happen anywhere, anytime, and any repertory. I think musicologists have actually shied away from it because it's a little bit dangerous to lose yourself in the music. There's a loss of self-control. And depending on your perspective, that can be either a wonderful thing or a not so wonderful thing. So there's a lot of controversy about that. And in fact, this was one of the reasons why a good many critics in the late 18th century and philosophers too, especially Kant, really came down very much against purely instrumental music. And I've got a chapter in the book about the philosophy that was going on at the same time that kind of reinforced the changes in repertory. Kant thought that he thought vocal music was wonderful. Vocal music was an extension of poetry. It was enhanced poetry, and poetry was the highest of all the arts for Kant. He thought instrumental music was kind of on the edge of being a fine art at all because it was coercive, because the composer was compelling you to feel a certain way through whatever affect he or she produced in the music. And for Kant, that meant that it was really, his term is pathological, that it's a bodily thing. There's nothing for the mind to process. And so that was a very dangerous kind of thing. And what happens around 1800 and the decades around 1800 is that philosophers actually take up Kant's challenge and begin to think about music as something you can think about, as something you can reflect on. And that, I think, by the time of late Beethoven in the 1820s, that's a fairly well established mode of thought. And it helps explain instrumental music's enormous rise around this time, rise in prestige. And of course, the social side of things that you mentioned is a big part of this. That not everyone who goes to the concert hall then or now has a really good understanding of what they're hearing. But in one of the later chapters in the book, I trace this rise of the prestige of reflective listening, the prestige of it. You start getting books, as I said, that tell you how to listen. And what's interesting is that this model of reflective listening becomes a kind of aspirational goal. How often was it realized? Who knows? In any given concert hall, there's going to be a huge variety of types of listening. But what I try to do at the very end of the book, in the in the epilogue is reconcile these two. And I'm speaking now as someone who's written a music appreciation textbook, and which is I'm kind of an inheritor of this tradition of reflective listening. But the more I thought about it over the years, resonant listening in its own way has a lot to offer, to take us out of ourselves, to transcend where we are at any given moment. And so my plea is for a kind of acknowledgement that both types of listening are entirely legitimate, and it's not a question of one being better than the other. And I think that that's something that musicologists, academics in particular, can take to heart, because we're trained, brainwashed, if you will, from undergraduate school to graduate school and onward, to think about music as an object, more so than as an experience. And I think, I hope that that's one of the things that people will take away from my book.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it too. By the end of the book, when you talk about resonant listening, and you say, it cannot be dismissed as a lower form of perception, and it often leads you to appreciate the elemental or the power of music in a different way. So I appreciate your comment there. I also appreciate the turn towards musicology in general, and I would like to ask you to reflect a little more, if you will, on the significance of your book for the field of musicology and adjacent fields in music studies and beyond. What would you like your colleagues, your students, first time people encountering a book in this field, what would you like them to take away from this project?
Well, gosh, that's really up to them. I'd like them to think about, in some way, integrating these two types of listening, and valuing both. As I say in the book, resonant and reflective listening rarely exist in pure form. These are opposite ends of a very broad spectrum. I think what really goes on, at least in my experience, is that we kind of oscillate between the two. There are moments that are transcendent, and then there are others that we're thinking about, invertible counterpoint. And so to the extent that we can learn to listen in a way that oscillates between those two, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and lots of rigorous analysis of primary materials and music analysis along the way. And I'm just trying to give a full picture of what's available to students and to instructors and expert readers. That's wonderful.
I have tried to write in a way that will appeal to a broad audience. And I hope it reaches a broad audience. And we'll see what's made of it. I think the attempt to integrate analysis and philosophy, while not new, I'm certainly not the first person to do that, but I think it's the kind of thing that musicologists can do. There are a lot of philosophers of music. It's a whole industry in the discipline of philosophy. And yet musicologists are trained to look at music. And it's not always easy to bridge those two disciplines. I hope I've done it justice.
I think you've done a fantastic job, Evan, and I wish you every success with the book. And thank you so much again for this opportunity to get together and to highlight some of the wonderful contributions of your research.